What is up, guys? It is Quinn here, and in this video I'm going to be going through my Week 11 injury report, so just running through all the players who are questionable, doubtful, and then the guys who have already been ruled out for the Sunday and Monday slate of games. As always, if you guys enjoy the content, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And if you do have any fantasy questions, start, sit, trade advice, waivers, drop it down below, and I will get back to every single person. But let's jump right into some of the players who are questionable heading into the Sunday and Monday games. And we basically have to start it off with the top player at basically, the three of the main offensive positions for the Ravens. So first, Lamar Jackson dealing with an illness. It seems like Lamar is battling some sort of illness like 2 to 3 times every single season. I would still expect him to play, and he is still someone I'd be locking into my lineup, but definitely something to monitor. We have Mark Andrews still dealing with the knee and shoulder injuries. I'd expect him to play this week. If he's starting, you're obviously going to fire him up as a very strong play. And then we have, I guess, the expected running back one for the Ravens, Gus Edwards, dealing with a hamstring/knee injury. I think if Gus Edwards plays and we're not hearing he's super limited, I think he's a decent flex RB3 option, but this could turn into a pretty gross committee, as we know with the Ravens. We have David Njoku, who is questionable with that ankle injury, kept him out, I believe, the last 2 or 3 weeks. If Njoku plays, I think he's a very strong tight end one moving forward. We have my guy Wan'Dale Robinson dealing with a hamstring injury. I believe Kenny Golladay is also questionable, but he is so far off the fantasy football radar. I think if Wan'Dale, doesn't play, probably a slight bump to Slayton, who does look like the wide receiver one there for the Giants. We have Devontae Adams dealing with an abdomen injury. I feel like this is pretty cut and dry. If he plays, you're obviously firing him up as a start. If he's out, and you were thinking about starting Derek Carr would have to be an auto sit for you. No Devontae, no Waller, no Renfro. Devontae Adams is really the only guy keeping that offense afloat right now. I wouldn't even love Derek Carr if Devontae Adams was healthy, but definitely someone who would need to be sitting if Devontae Adams was out. We have Zeke, who has missed the last 2 weeks with that knee injury. I'd expect him to give it a go this week. We may not see his typical 15, 16 carry workload, but I do expect him to still have some touchdown upside. If you're debating on playing him, I think he's somewhere in that fringe RB2 range, maybe a high-end running back 3 this week. Even though it totally seems like Tony Pollard is the far superior back, I do still think the Cowboys are going to run some of their offense through Ezekiel Elliott. So, maybe he's a high-end RB3 this week. Moving forward, I think he's more of a, back-end RB2. Then, as always, we have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, both questionable. Keenan Allen with that hamstring, Mike Williams with the ankle. It kind of seems like things are trending in the right direction for this offense as a whole. If Herbert can get these weapons back, he probably jumps himself back up to, being a mid-tier QB1 or higher. And then if Keenan Allen is healthy, I think he's probably, on the fringe of being a wide receiver 1. Mike Williams somewhere in that wide receiver 2 range. Would just like to see these guys out on the field. I would consider Josh Palmer, probably a fringe wide receiver 2 if both of these guys are out. If one of these guys plays, Palmer's probably like a back-end wide receiver 3, someone you don't feel super great about. And then we have another team who has a ton of key top options questionable. It is the Arizona Cardinals, who I believe play on Monday. They have DeAndre Hopkins, Marquise Brown, and Kyler Murray all questionable. D-Hop and Kyler with hamstring injuries. Marquise Brown potentially coming off of IR with that foot. I believe they activated him, so he has the 3-week window, but he could hypothetically play on Monday. I would say Marquise Brown, if he's active, even though, there's maybe some risk he's limited, I still think he's someone who's startable as probably a fringe wide receiver 2. DeAndre Hopkins, obviously, if he plays, you're starting him. And then same thing with Kyler. I honestly think that Hopkins and Brown are probably still startable, even if it is Colt McCoy instead of Kyler. But we're going to have an extra day to kind of monitor that situation. And remember, those Monday night games, the injury reports aren't official when I'm looking at it. I'm kind of just projecting because theirs come out the day later because they do play, a day later than the Sunday games. Now we have one player who is doubtful this week. We've got the kicker position, Dustin Hopkins. If you had Hopkins, find a different option, most likely. Still dealing with that hamstring. I do believe he missed last week, so he's probably not rostered by anyone at this point. And then I guess some semi-good news here. We don't have a ton of players who have already been ruled out. PJ Walker was ruled out earlier in the week with that ankle. Not great news for DJ Moore. He's really struggled with Baker at quarterback. Baker will be the guy, I guess, at least starting this game. Wouldn't be shocked if we see Sam Darnold sometime in the future. DJ Moore, I would kind of limit your expectations this week. And honestly, moving forward, if Walker isn't the quarterback, I think at this point, anyone not named Baker is probably going to be a plus for DJ Moore. We have JD McKissick, who is going to continue to miss time with that neck injury. Never good when you see like a neck injury pop up. They typically linger a long time, and obviously can be serious and long term. I think we saw that with Chris Carson last year. So I think Antonio Gibson can still be fired up as probably a back-end running back 2 this week. Brian Robinson in the RB3 territory. Just have Gibson getting that receiving workload. Brian Robinson getting more of the carries on the ground. We have Corey Davis out with a knee. I wouldn't say Corey Davis is super fantasy relevant on his own, but this is a big plus to Garrett Wilson, who has really lit up the stat sheet with Corey Davis out, because we have Elijah Moore, kind of in the doghouse. So it just kind of really opens things up for Garrett Wilson. Probably, honestly, a wide receiver 2 this week with Davis out. Unfortunately, we have Jerry Jeudy out with an ankle injury. I think this definitely gives Courtland Sutton a bump. With how weak the wide receiver position is this week, I do think he could be considered a high-end wide receiver 2 option, just because we have all these teams like the Seahawks, Metcalf, Lockett out, Bucks, Evans, Godwin. We've got the Jaguars with Christian Kirk, and then like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So just a ton of playable wide receivers that are out. So it does kind of bump up these other guys. So Jeudy out, Sutton a much stronger play than if Jeudy was healthy. As expected, Jamar Chase out with that hip. It seems like there's some optimism that he could return for Week 12. That would obviously be great. We'll see if he's 100% Jamar Chase, but I think this is great news. If you kind of took my advice as a contender, you go out, try to bring in some of these injured options, because if he's returning in Week 12, even if it's Week 13, give him a week or 2 to kind of rev up, and then he's going to be giving you top production for the fantasy playoffs, because when healthy, he is going to be a top 5 fantasy wide receiver. And then the final player is Juju Smith-Schuster out with the concussion. This was something I kind of expected earlier on in the week. Just the way he got hit, looked like he was out cold. I don't think you want to rush a guy, back super quickly from that. In terms of Kadarius Toney, we also had Mecole Hardman, who was put on IR. This is looking like a prime setup for a big-time Kadarius Toney game. I think if he's getting somewhere in like the 70+% route participation, like Toney could put together a big game. I just have to imagine you give that dude, a certain number of opportunities, he's going to make something happen with it. So I think if you have Toney, I think he can be considered probably a top 20 play this week. I think I underranked him a little bit in the wide receiver rankings, but I was kind of, hedging on potential guys playing for the Chiefs. With these guys out, I think Kadarius Toney is a very, very strong play. So that is going to wrap it up for every single injury. I feel like this was actually probably the fewest, injuries that I've actually had like written down on the sheet, but there were a pretty significant number of big names on here. So not sure if this is a, positive or negative week for that. But if you guys did enjoy the content, do me a huge favor, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Any questions, drop them down below. As always, thank you guys for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.